The hour of 6:30 has arrived. I'd like to bring this study session of Urbana School District 116 to order. A roll call, please.
Member Hasanaka,
Here.
Member Orr,
Here.
Member Ogalski,
Here.
Member Carter is here, Vice President Exum,
Here.
President Pulaski.
Here, are there any additions, corrections, or modifications to tonight's agenda? Hearing none. Citizen statements. If anybody would like to make a statement before the board, there are goldenrod sheets in the back of the room. Please fill one out. First up tonight is Caitlin Clark.
There we go. Hi, Happy New Year, and thanks again for taking public comment. I'm here to represent a small group of folks that have been talking about the DL program for a while now. And we just wanted to reiterate that we're here for the long haul to help support things like the strategic plan, committee, or anything related to that we're really interested in helping with things like that. I personally would like to see that happen prior to any implementation of other things, because I'm having a hard time figuring out how we can figure out where we're going to go if we don't have that in place. But regardless, many of us are really excited about helping figure out how to move forward. And just I'm here to say that, in addition to wanted to ask a couple of questions about what could be done now to help support the DL teachers that are feeling the stress. I would like to hear a little bit more about what are the professional development opportunities that have been provided to date, and then what are the kinds of things that we could do to improve those, specifically for the spring semester, to try to help just people feel more supported. I think that a lot of our monolingual teachers had a lot of good conversations and helping understand now like what they need to do to help make sure that these programs thrive as well. But the parents also want to be here to support. So that's really all I'm here to say. And that, of course, we all want to be sure that the strategic plan and anything that happens with the DL program also makes sure that we're putting student learning at the forefront. So looking for things like the access testing, as well as any other types of evaluation of the program, that we can really bring those to the forefront of the decisions that are made moving forward. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to make a statement before the board tonight? All right, seeing none. There is no call for an executive session after tonight's meeting. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Student ambassador report.
Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I would just like to send my best wishes to all of our students, and for this upcoming semester. It's going to be a very long but hopefully quick semester, so I'd just like to send my well wishes.
Thank you, Michael. Our administrative report tonight is the 2023 legislative update.
Great, thank you. And did we thank George is sitting in for John? Welcome, George. And Anna. You're not Anna.
I didn't do
Oh, you already did that?
No, I
You want-
haven't. And thanks again to Anacina for running our cameras tonight.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to jump right in. This is really short. My apologies for sending this to you guys today, but hopefully if you have questions, this is a great time to ask them. So as you know, it is January 1st, and we always have very exciting new legislation that we have to incorporate this time of the year. Some of these are items that we have been working on already. Some were approved earlier in the year, so we, in anticipation of them coming, have been working on them. And some of them we still need to pull together teams to discuss. So the first one is pretty cut and dry. This is a civic engagement excuse student absent provision for middle school and high school students. They're allowed to receive one excuse absence per year to attend a civic engagement, government entity, nonprofit organization sponsored event. We do plan as a district to, the provision allows you to do this, and we're going to enact this part where we're going to request that we have some kind of proof that the student did attend the event, and that we are given some kind of advance notice. We haven't figured out how much time we might ask for, if it would be 2 days, 3 days. We haven't really gotten that far. But we are going to request advance notice. This will allow teachers to know, when students are not going to be present in class, and also to make sure the students have time to kind of pre-request work and things like that that they may miss. So we'll work with administration, counselors, and registrars at both schools to get this in place for next year. Any questions about this one? Okay, we'll hop to the next one. Student IDs and suicide prevention information. So this is one that we have been anticipating, and we've also been talking about this at the district level. We have district threat assessment teams. We have threat assessment teams at every building. And this has been something that has come up. So the legislation requires that districts issue any districts that issue ID cards to their middle school or high school students, which almost every district that is a unit district would do that we provide on the back of the cards information regarding national suicide prevention and crisis text information. So in anticipation of this, we kind of did a little pilot in August. The sixth graders, as you know, are new to the middle school, and they don't have student IDs when they walk in. So to kind of prepare and see how this would work, we pre-printed, and I was going to bring the labels, and I forgot as a visual, but we pre-printed a little label that has the Prevention Lifeline number on it. We provided those to all advisory teachers, and when the sixth graders received their IDs, those stickers were put on the back of the IDs. And that is basically what we're planning to do for all 7th through 12th graders, is what we did with the 6th graders. So, questions about that? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hop to the next one. Dual credit coursework and post-secondary plans. So this is currently something that we're already doing. Our counselors and our our counselors and the teachers that teach dual credit courses at the high school work really closely with Parkland. So this requires the school district and community college to annually assess data pertaining to dual credit course enrollment, completions, and subsequent post-secondary enrollment. So I meet with Dr. Lau at the beginning of every year. It may be a different person now that she's moving into her role as president, but for the past couple of years, I've met with her and the superintendent from Unit 4. We review our dual credit courses. We talk about the number of students enrolled. So this is something that we've already been doing for quite a while. Any questions about that one? Okay, computer literacy course requirement. So this is something that we still need to put a little more work into. This provision adds 1 year of a course that includes intensive instruction in computer literacy as a graduation requirement. We currently have similar computer literacy skills incorporated into some of our other courses that students take, but it is currently not a graduation requirement. We have already, in anticipation of this coming, started offering on working on a course called Intro to Computer Science. So that is already in the works. Christine Rinkenberger, our new assistant principal at UHS, who is in charge of the master schedule and working really closely with Erica Uscali, our director of curriculum. They've already started putting together the syllabus and everything for this. So that will be in place for fall 2023. Don't ask me what the specific skills are. I can't remember. automatic enrollment in AP courses. So this is something that we do need to put a little more work into. This act requires districts to develop a plan to expand access of AP programming to any student who meets or exceeds the standards. So basically, beginning next school year, any student who, based on MAP testing or any of our other benchmark assessments or their grades from last year, who could be in an accelerated placement program, we are required now to automatically enroll them in those classes, and then the students or the parents have to opt out. So we've not put together what that practice or what that protocol is going to look like at this point, what the opt-out process will be, but we are required to go ahead and automatically put those students in classes. So that basically means, you know, there are a lot of our students who we see their scores and we say, hey, would you like to try A-Push, or would you like to, you know, you really would be a great AP, you know, Calc student. And we leave it up to the parents and the students to make that decision as a family, whether or not the student is going to enroll for that into that class. We also give the students, we have that 7-day opt-out window. So anytime a student enrolls in an AP class, if they enter into the class and feel like it's too difficult and they want to leave the class within the first week, they're allowed to do that. And vice versa. If we have a student who is kind of in the regular level of an English class or whatever, and they feel like, well, I really would be more challenged in an AP class, they have that first week of school to opt in. This kind of takes away that option, and the district is going to automatically be putting those students who meet or exceed certain standards into those classes. So.
Can I,
Okay.
can
Yeah.
I ask two questions? And I
Sure.
realize you say at the bottom that a plan needs to be in place, but I'm just wondering, first, the timing of meet or exceeds, can that take place in the middle of a school year
Yeah.
in some way? And second, what it exactly means to meet standards? Are we talking about just whatever the benchmark MAP
Whatever the
score
benchmark would
is?
be, yeah.
And what subjects does this, does it pertain to all subjects or just a selection?
I think it would be any specific subjects where we offer an AP option. And the hardest part of this is going to be for 8th graders coming into 9th grade, because their benchmark is going to be very different than the benchmark that, you know, we're not going to know, right? So I think it's going to apply more so for students after they've been there as a freshman. But again, if we have kids who their MAP scores are off the charts, there's no reason why we wouldn't put them into like AP Geometry, or the AP Prep would be more so what would be offered to those 9th graders, is that AP Prep option. But for the students that are 10th, 11th, 12th graders, I think anything that we have an AP class where we're offering it, we would have to automatically put them in, and then a parent or student would have to opt them out. So we have to put a lot more thought and work into it, Brian. But you're asking really good questions that we still need to talk more in depth about. So, but I think it is the intent of we all understand the intent, right, is to get more students from marginalized groups, more kids of color into these courses. And I know in our district, that is a goal, that has been a goal for many years. And what tends to happen is, I think a lot of our students who could be in those classes for lots of different reasons, right? I work a job, you know, if I leave school, I go work, I take care of siblings, I have a lot of other responsibilities where they could be taking AP and they, for lots of reasons, don't. So, yeah. So, good questions. We'll have to talk a little bit more about, but I wanted to make you aware that it is out there, and we will have to have a plan for this for the fall. The timing part is going to be the hardest part, because based on when we have our benchmarking, in the spring is when everybody chooses all their courses. So we have to, yeah, it's going to be a master scheduling nightmare, which is going to be really difficult, but we'll figure out how we can make it work. and we will make it work. Okay. And the last one is withholding student documents. So this prohibits public high schools from withholding any student's grades, transcripts, diplomas as a consequence for unpaid students' encumbered student accounts. So at the end of the school year, districts are going to have to keep a kind of account of what those unpaid totals were and report them to ISB. I don't know if that means we'll get reimbursed for them in some way or not, but that is kind of why I'm thinking they're going to have us report that information, but who knows, maybe they just want to keep track of it. But we will have to catalog all of the unpaid fees that students maybe have accumulated and report those to ISB. And this will happen this spring with this graduation season. So we have,
How significant is that number?
what's that?
How significant is that number?
I was just gonna say, so the bigger, you know, we don't have lunch fees, which is a lot of districts, that is where a lot of students accumulate unpaid balances, so that isn't really an issue for us. But at the high school, we have a lot of students, and I see the list every year at graduation time, because when we are looking at gowns, we're waiving fees for those kids, but it's mostly driver ed, which driver's ed is like $200. They're unpaid things like books that are lost, athletic fees that never get paid. All of our students who are free and reduced, those fees are wiped out automatically anyway. So these would be students who would not be considered free and reduced. We wipe out those fees automatically at the district level. Katie, you look like you wanted to add something.
Just to say, we do make attempts to collect those fees.
we
We
do.
actually send out monthly statements to parents to request the fees be paid. So, I mean, I do feel like we do make our best effort to collect. It's just if we are unable to, we can't withhold their graduation requirements.
Yep. Thank you for adding that. Yes, we do. And that comes from the building level. So our building secretaries do that. So they send out a monthly reminder. But what tends to happen, and we see it at graduation time, when the gowns come out and everybody's like, oh no, you owe $300 or $400 or something like that. And we've not, we have allowed students to participate in graduation for sure if they owed the last couple years, especially during COVID. But this takes it a little further beyond just participating in graduation. This is once they've graduated, we're no longer allowed to withhold any of these items. So I think for most of our kids, it's, you know, less than $500, but that can be a lot when you've got a class of 300. So I think that was the last one. Any other questions? I've linked in all of the language, so if you want to go in, Brian, like that AP one, if you want to go in and read a little deeper about it, I've linked, all those are hyperlinked in the document that you got this afternoon. So you can go in and read those in a little more detail. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our second item here is board policy review for public participation 2:230. This was something I think I asked to be brought to us when we had our last meeting for DL, to ensure that we don't run into time issues with regards to interpretation of people who are speaking public comment in Spanish. So our lawyers basically came up with a draft for us to look at, to consider tonight.
Yes. So the bottom of the policy is the new language. So what is in bold and underlined print is the draft suggested language from our attorneys. And this would align with what we typically would see in a press policy. So the press policies that you guys are used to reviewing a couple times a year, this language aligns with what other districts have in their press policies. We also put this on as an action item. Our attorney felt like, since we are continuing to have conversations and public comment around dual language, there was no need to wait until the next meeting unless the board would like to do so that we can suspend our second reading, our requirement, and approve this tonight if everyone's comfortable with this language as presented.
Does anyone have any questions?
Any
Or
changes or suggestions or?
I will just comment that if the goal is to increase access to public comment by allowing extra time for translation, then we should also add the ability to send it in written form, because there are plenty of people that cannot make it to these meetings, no matter what they try or do.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add, I think that it is important that we keep some kind of time frame. I like how they worded it. So if it's all about the same topic, just to choose one spokesperson, which I think is great, because oftentimes we do hear repetitiveness.
So I think this one is the time frame piece is saying if you get 5 minutes to say it in English, then you also get that amount of time to have it also said in Spanish. Yep.
any further comments or questions? Okay. I guess this will be as an action item later. If anybody wishes to defer that, they could let us know at that time. Okay, thank you. Well, I guess it is
Time for action.
time for action items. Our first action item tonight is a resolution authorizing dismissal of part-time educational support personnel.
And I'll just add, I don't know if Dr. Franklin wants to add anything else that you can share what this is for. It's kind of odd for us to have a RIF at this time of the year, so.
Yes, it is odd for us to have a RIF at this time of year, but it's not necessarily odd for these RIFs to occur at the Adult Education Center. And so the RIFs that are occurring are for part-time staff and who don't want to be full-time, and they're still staying on as substitute teachers. But right now we don't have the enrollment to support a class at this time for some of our folks. And so sometimes this happens, but they still stay on, and so RIF is just part of the protocol that we follow.
Does anyone have any questions, comments? Is there a motion to support this resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further comments or discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Hassanaka?
Yes.
Member Orr?
Yes.
Member Ogalski?
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Member Vice President Exum?
Yes.
And President Pulaski?
Yes. Our second action item tonight is the board policy review update for 2:230. Is there a motion?
So moved to pass the updated policy.
Is there any further comments or discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Hassanaka?
Yes.
Member Orr?
Yes.
Member Ogalski?
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Exum?
Yes.
And President Pulaski?
Yes. Our first study topic tonight is 10.1 High Impact Tutoring Program. Tanya.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here this evening to talk about our program. District-led high-impact tutoring is tied to a grant that was, if we want to go ahead, should I do this? District-led high-impact tutoring is a grant that we received shortly after we had learned earlier this year that we did not have the 21st century grant funding for DPW and King Elementaries. For the past year, through our ESSER funding, we had been supporting programs after school at Wiley Elementary, at Thomas Paine, and at Yankee Ridge as well. So as we were making our plans this year for programming, when this grant became available, we had determined in conversation with all 5 administrators and their support APs and coordinators within their buildings to go ahead and take a chance with 4 of our schools to do the high impact tutoring grant. And basically, part of what this grant involves is that we have to partner with Illinois State University. There are 6 regions in the state of Illinois, and there are colleges assigned to supervise. When this grant first became available over a year ago, it was only open to the universities to provide the tutoring within their regions, and they were having trouble reaching the entirety of their regions. So that is when they offered this grant this year to see if any school districts wanted to take the lead. On December 12th, there was a letter sent out on ISB just updating. I believe it's 23 school districts with more coming on board soon. And so it's very exciting to see it grow. Another part of the grant is that we have to partner with another learning partner. So we chose Carnegie Learning. Part of that is for our focus for the grant, looking at reading and math, but we also have some students that are Spanish speaking, and they had some components that could help support that. So we had looked at those attributes in making that selection. So on the next slide, we talk a little bit about the district-led grant itself. And within the grant, we had to make certain concessions or agreements on different things that we would involve in running the program. So part of this was that we had agreed we would focus on reading and math, that for our part, we would like to use after-school hours, and so for all 4 buildings, it's from 3 until 4:30. We also agreed to a ratio of 1 tutor for every 5 students, that within that hour and a half, there would be 1 hour of instruction, and that it would occur 3 days a week. We selected Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The tutors themselves need to have 30 minutes of plan time because they need to look and see what the assignments are for the students that are at their table each night. So what we do is we provide snack, and we do an SEL activity with the kids before they go to the classrooms at 3:30 to begin the instruction. There are 4 sessions throughout the year. We had hoped that we would start back in September, but we did have to push off to October a bit because the vendors, learning partners became overwhelmed, and we were having trouble getting people with their contracts in place. But we needed that little bit of time too. We also did an abbreviated session here going from October to December, and in January on the 17th, we'll get started with our 3rd session. We will have 2 6-week sessions to finish out the year, and we should be done by the end of April. One piece that makes us unique from other school districts in the area is we committed to using our teachers as our tutors. Different areas allow for different levels of experience in working with students. We wanted our kids to have familiar faces and people that they see during the day. So to be a tutor in our program, you need to be a certified teacher or a certified substitute teacher, somebody that has their bachelor's degree plus the certification to be a substitute. So that has worked out well to fill positions. Our enrollment criteria, the students needed to be in grades 2 through 5. One of the reasons we did not select K1 is we're very lucky to have I Count, I Read volunteers that are coming into our buildings to work with our K1 students already. So with that already in place, we decided to focus a bit more on 2 through 5. We also had to say within the grant what type of screening tool we were going to use to monitor our students' scores to help us to determine enrollment in the program and to see what kind of progress that we're making. So the other piece that worked out as well is Carnegie Learning takes our data and they help us place the students within their curriculum. So it is personalized student by student. The next part was that we had to ensure with different grant programs you can do different things. And in some areas they will say that a student with a 504 IEP or an English language learner is a student who's already getting extra services and have a tendency to prohibit some of their activity within the programs. That is not what we wrote for. We said that all students be considered within the grant within our school system. And what that involved was taking our students, grades 2 through 5, and basically listing them for their reading and their math scores. And we had to start with the kids that scored the lowest and work our way up through the list with the invitations. In conversation with our ISB contact, I had mentioned that one of the problems we run into is that we might have some students that are second graders at the 1st percentile for performance, but they have to have somebody walk them home, an older sibling that might be in 3rd and 4th grade. And so we looked to see how those students performed as well. And along the way, we went ahead and said that if the peer, if their sibling is at 10%, 10th percentile or lower, we would go ahead and take them into the program as well. One of the challenges, of course, is that our enrollment is completely reliant upon the number of teachers that we can get hired. So that has been something that's been a little bit of a challenge. We're hoping as we start to see some of the good things happen, we did get 3 more applicants over break. So we're excited that there is some of that information getting out there and they want to be a part of it. So I'm hoping as people are more into the groove for the school year that we might see some more staff apply as well. So we do leave that posted. And then growth has to be monitored throughout the program. So for the reading piece, when we started the program, we said no computer work. We did not want the kids, we only have them for an hour. And to be on a computer during that time, we feel that we want them with people. As we talked with all these programs, so many of them wanted us to have the kids log in, put on a headset, and work for an hour with somebody online. That isn't what we wanted. And that's why Carnegie was able to work with us so that there is a 10-minute amount of time with our reading program where the student on Tuesday gets on, learns new vocabulary words that are geared towards their level. Then the story is read to them over the headphones, and then they read the story back to the computer. Takes about 10 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes if it's a tough vocabulary list for kids. While they are reading it back, the software does an analysis of how they're reading and how much accuracy. It's not a 100% perfect, but it is interesting to watch and see all the different diagnostics come through. For the math program, we have not been using a computer piece, but we are looking at it for the next semester. It's a program called Zorbits, and what the teachers are finding is when you have all 5 kids right there at the table with you, all demanding attention, that can be a problem to keep it moving that way. So if they can have a student practice for a few minutes on something else, that brings them back refocused and they can keep working with the students around their table. We do our progress monitoring on Thursdays. So for Reading Assistant Plus, it will add a quiz at the end of that. There's no more than 5 questions, and the students answers those so that we can see how they're performing. The Zorbits is kind of, as a former math teacher, it's a little bit skill and drill. Sometimes we say skill, drill, and kill, but we're hoping by limiting it to 10 minutes that it would not be a factor that way. We've been looking at the program over break, the coordinators have, and so we will be talking in the next week to figure out if we want to go ahead with this piece as well. It's already paid for and part of the package. In the beginning, we thought we would send it home with the families so that they could practice it on their own if they want to. The kids don't do that, so we thought to make it work for us a little bit more, we'd like to see how that piece can play into it. For the next slide, we have just a breakdown of the grant. There'll probably have to be a little bit of a rewrite on the money amounts simply because we have more certified than we have non-certified staff working. So we'll slide a little bit of the funding around that way. We have our benefits and services that go with any of our positions, unemployment, workman's comp, TRS. And then we have our transportation, which I think is what really helps the program as well. Each of the buildings have a route that picks the kids up. This time of year in particular, we don't like to double up because it gets dark so early. We find that as we get into spring, if we're getting tight on funds, we can start to combine some of the routes. Dawn, a first student, has said she'd work on that with me if we need to. I do not see a problem with getting all of the money spent. And in fact, some of the money that have been designated for ESSER funds for the after-school programs there will be able to help us get through the end of April. Which last year, Linda Gibbons has always talked with me, and we've discussed what might work out best. And we find that the programs struggle a little bit in May, just because there's so many other things that are going on. And we decided we would try to get that wrapped up end of April then for these programs. It does work out nicely that our MAP scores are collected at the end of April too. So we have to do check-ins with the coordinators to look at our data and make decisions. And so we'll do that in May real quick just to wrap things up. Now for our favorite parts. We've got our data. First of all is our MAP scores with reading, just looking at since our fall screening was done and our winter screening was done. Keep in mind that the scores on the side are percentiles, so it's going to go from 0 to 100. We batted around a lot of ideas on how we wanted to demonstrate growth. We were trying to figure out what would work well. We were one of the first districts to commit in our area. So in working with ISB, we agreed that not every school district will have MAP, and so they encouraged us to use percentiles. We spent a lot of time looking today in particular, because we're all back together again today, and looking at the Dr. Preston Williams data and the fact that it shows a negative 0.8 for growth. What we're finding is when user error, pulling data out of the system for our kids that are taking the Spanish reading test for MAP, the scores aren't pulling out as nicely as we'd like them to. And I'm sure that's on me. And so we're going to continue to analyze that and figure out what's going on with that piece of the program. They have the highest enrollment, the largest number of kids. We also just started in the last month with the Spanish version of the reading curriculum that's used with Carnegie. We were already starting to see some really good, promising results. It's just it hasn't been enough time to really fully implement it yet. We're feeling confident going into January, though, that we'll get able to put it in place. We've also been looking at some of our data from our RTI sessions at Dr. Preston Williams and seeing that kids that we might have opted to put into the bookshelf phonics English reading part, that the student might need to be in the Phonetica piece instead to help bridge that learning. These are all individualized plans that we're working on with the kids and their placements, and so we're still trying to figure it out a little bit. One of my concerns with the company was my point that will this be a one and done type grant situation? And ISB has talked with me, and Dr. Bachter has said that it is their intent, whether the state follows through, that they will do a continuation grant next year. And so there's a very strong possibility that we want to get this system down so we can really capitalize on it again next year. They had their choice of reading or math. DPW did choose to do all reading, so that's why you don't see a math score there. We're going to be having our meeting this week to determine what we want to do moving forward, but this is what math has shown. These buildings had felt that since they had literacy interventionists on staff already, that they wanted to put at least a third of their kids into a math program. And we had an awful lot of kids that they're in the first percentile and they're in there for reading and math. So having conversations with the building literacy interventionists to figure out, you know, what are they already getting versus what they could get if they're in the math program. So this was our last slide. I'm optimistic. I really hope that she will be able to follow through with grant money for us. They have been using us as a sounding board with our training with ISU. I had asked that we scale back on that, and she granted that last week. So any teachers out there that don't want to do the ISU module training, you know, that's off the table now. So, and I do think that it was a little bit frustrating for the staff because it was stuff that as certified teachers they already do. It was geared more towards college students that haven't taught. Okay. Do you have any questions for me this evening?
Board members, any questions? Go ahead, Robbie.
So on these last two graphs, or tables rather, are those the change in percentile, like the average or mean
Yes.
change in percentile?
The average change in percentile. Some kids with huge jumps and some kids with little jumps. And some spots where they went, it looks backwards and it's hard to explain when you get into they had a 169 in the fall, they had a 166 in the winter, but because nationally norm speaking, they're moving ahead, it could drop you back as much as 30 on that percentile ranking. We did have a student that we had in that situation, so
Yeah.
checking on those.
So another thing to just think about or put these numbers into context is what is, you know, when you're talking about percentile, if you say a kid went from, because all of these students started at below 10 is what you said.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if there's a bigger difference in change from 1 percentile to, if you go up 2 points to 3 versus 10 going up to 12.
Yes.
And so the other thing is about standard deviation,
Yes.
what the issues are. So, you know, really like on the prior slide where you're like, Dr. Williams went down 1% or 0.8 of a percentile,
Mm-hmm.
and the others went up. I mean, they all could be the same
Mm-hmm.
if you look at standard deviations.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I didn't know if I should do a statistics course tonight while we were up here. Because
Well-
we've been looking at all the different pieces, trying to determine how can we make it better for our kids and make sure that we're giving them what they need.
No, well, I'm just saying if you're using data to analyze your outcomes, you should use the data to analyze the outcomes. Because,
Absolutely.
You know, that's hard to say what that means.
No, and I think that that's been kind of a nice little piece for this program because they are using the data to make those decisions. They have a company that's helping them with the placement as well, so we send the scores to the company. We have to upload it in our confidential little HTTP. But once it goes up, then they go ahead and tell us each grade level has a low, medium, and high. And it could be a fifth grader working at kindergarten medium. You know, we see a lot of that because if they're in the first percentile, they are struggling. And most of the kids are probably double dipping as well. I think they're getting services during the day. So even the kids that showed some dramatic jumps, it's not just this program. It's everybody and all the efforts that everyone is making to help these kids move forward. It's been a challenge. But we're very
Anyone-
glad for this opportunity.
Anyone else? To that end, I guess I have a couple questions of my own. So how do these numbers compare to the numbers for the building as a whole? I mean, is there outsized growth basically to the kids participating in the program?
Mm-hmm. I didn't look at the scores that go with the buildings in detail yet. We had just finished up our testing back in December as we were heading into break. So I made sure that I pulled this together. When I met with Christina this afternoon, though, we did talk about looking at that and trying to make sure how is it going. We did find some anomalies with the sibling enrollments, for instance. We did find one student that tested in the 26th percentile when they first started at the beginning of the year, and dropped back a little bit into the 18th percentile. But the bigger they are when they start, the harder they fall when we spread it out. And so trying to get a read on all of that. And when I talked with Mrs. Jackson this afternoon, that was one of the things she would like us to do as well, sit down together to compare how are we doing as a building. Because one of the things, we know that we're working on a literacy pilot going into the spring with our curriculum, and there have been some questions about, is this something we can use in the classroom? And I think we need to keep looking at the data and make decisions. If it's helping our struggling students improve, I think it has to be a consideration.
The other question I have is with regards to access to the program.
Mhm.
Is it just strictly based on who district-wide is below a certain score, or are there resource constraints per building so that you end up having basically some buildings will have a higher threshold in terms of that percentage than others?
At this time, these 4 buildings are the only ones that are doing this type of program. And so they are looking at 2nd through 5th grade and who's in the first percentile for reading and math.
Okay.
And then making our decisions based on that. We have not filled all of our teaching spots, so we're not at capacity yet. So at King Elementary and at DPW, we have budgeted for 50 students, which means we would need to have 10 teachers. And while we have 8 teachers over at DPW, I believe we're sitting at 6 over at King.
I
And
see.
so one of the perks that we did have this semester was the America Reads, America Counts folks at the U of I had asked if we had any interest in an after-school program for support, and they gave us 3 or 4 people, volunteers or workers, with each of our programs in all of those 4 buildings. Wiley utilized the Educate 201 course over from the U of I, so they had 5 volunteers in their building. And then Linda has her program at Leo, as far as where she also draws volunteers. So part of it was a system. The teachers are really good at working with 25 to 31 students, fantastic. And so that's why I kind of assumed 5 would be a no-brainer. But they want to do their best with all 5 students. So we try to watch, we want to make sure they don't have 5 different skill sets sitting at the table. So it's constantly assessing to see how are our kids grouped. But we also don't want, if a teacher has a relationship with a student and they're getting great results, the teachers have typically said, I'd really prefer to keep them with me and keep this going. Yeah, it's a 3rd level that I need to prep for now, but it's okay. So, they're great. It has been a huge effort trying something new and different, and all of us trying to look at it and see what is the best way to go. And it's been fun. Not without its challenges as any new program is, but I really have expressed to the state that we need to do this a second year for all the effort that goes into it, and we're getting the swing of it. You know, they of course would like to see us as a district pick it up, and I said, I'm not sure we're quite there yet. And, you know, so I'm hoping, she had said that not everybody, the grant money isn't used up, so it's a very strong possibility that it could happen again to only the schools that were in it this year.
I had a question for you. Do you take into account the students' attendance?
Yes.
Okay, because I know sometimes that can have a real impact on their test scores, because let's say they've only been there a week and a half out of the month, you know, they're missing a lot of time, even though we have all these wraparound services and the tutoring, which I think this is a great program, but I was just curious as if their attendance was
We're
worked
trying to
into
track
this.
that. That'll be on the masses spreadsheet that ISB is sending to us. So we'll pull all that data out to compile into in what they want, and then they will put it in a nice report for us. The piece that we have been trying to encourage is if a student has missed 3 days, the coordinator calls the parents to find out, you know, what's going on, because these are very limited seats, and we really need your child to be here. With all the illness that's going around right now, you know, it's been hard to draw a line at 3 absences. But at the same time, if they've missed 3, they've missed like 1 week of what they could be doing here. And if the kids, we could put somebody else in that spot. We can always, they said, can we reassess? The coordinators asked if we could reassess each session. And I said, you know, I think that sounds good. Because if somebody did have some type of illness that pushed them out, we shouldn't keep them from coming back in.
Right,
I
thank
think-
you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much for this interesting
Appreciate
presentation.
the support. Thank you.
Our second study topic this evening is our equity audit update. Dr. Caffey.
Good evening and Happy New Year. So I've been asked to give a brief update on the status of our equity audit. And so I would like to just kind of walk us through our timeline. And so what you have before you is the original timeline that was established by the district equity leadership team in conjunction with our equity auditor back in June when we first launched the equity audit process. And once we launched the process, there was a clear understanding that the equity audit could take anywhere from 9 to 12 months to complete. And so I am pleased to report as of today that we are on target to complete the equity audit sometime this spring, early summer at the absolute latest. A lot of that will be contingent upon phases 2 and 4, which I'll explain in just a moment. But just to kind of recap, we did complete phase 1 in June, and you have the different bullet points of what the DELT team went through in conjunction with the equity auditor. In July, we did receive the data set that the auditor requested from us, and our IT department is currently working on those data sets with the anticipation that that will be submitted back to the equity auditor sometime this month. In October, the week of October 17th through the 21st, Dr. Dubiel was on site here in Urbana, in which she conducted our focus groups with our students, families, and staff, as well as we launched the surveys for all of those stakeholders also. The surveys launched on October 17th, but remained open until November 4th to give everyone the opportunity to make sure that they had to complete the surveys, not just over the course of those 5 days. So phase 4, again, phase 4 cannot begin until the auditor receives the data sets from us. Again, we did meet with her back in early December, John Gutzmer and I, and he assured us that he would be on target to submit that information sometime in January. So once phase 4 is complete and the auditor has a time and a chance to analyze all of the data, we should receive the report, the initial draft sometime, hopefully in April, in which we will have the opportunity to review that report, look for any kind of errors, challenge any kind of the information that may be within that report, looking for mistakes. And then we will submit any revisions that we're requesting to that report back to the auditor. for her to then finalize the audit and be prepared to give us a presentation to the board, sometime late this spring or early summer at the absolute latest. And so just for full transparency, I did want to share a little bit of information with you in terms of the survey participation that took place from October 17th through November 14th, or November 4th rather. We did have over 1,400 surveys completed. As you can see, we had 320 staff members complete the survey. We had over 739 students completed and 374 families complete the survey. You also have a breakdown of the focus groups and who participated. The focus groups were organized by affinity at the various level. So you can see who participated at the high school level in terms of our white students, students who identify as Asian, Pacific Islander, African American, Latinx/Hispanic, multiracial, LGBTQIA, et cetera, with the same breakdown for our middle school students as well. In addition, we also wanted to make sure that we surveyed students in our alternative programming who would have normally been attending our high school. So we did interview several students at the Adult Education Center, those students who range from the ages of 16 to 18. Next, you will see a breakdown of the focus group participation for staff members by affinity. We had the biggest participation of faculty members who did not want to participate by a specific affinity. We had 8 out of the 14 individuals who registered who actually showed up for those focus groups. And last but not least, you have the number of families who participated in our focus groups, which was relatively successful based on the number who registered. I think that particular week was an extremely cold week in Urbana, which the feedback that we received is that a lot of individuals just simply did not make it out that week just because of the temperatures. And so we tried to organize some different virtual focus groups to give individuals an opportunity to participate if they wanted to. We did have a little bit of success holding virtual focus groups. I think that the temperature and the climate that week just adversely affected some of our participation. So, nonetheless, as I mentioned, we are on track to finish this equity audit by mid-spring, hopefully no later than early summer. So, if there's any questions, I'll receive those now.
Board members, any questions? Go ahead, Brian.
Couple questions for you. So the first is particularly on the staff slide, it looks like the attendance. So am I right to assume the registered is people who said they're going to come
Correct.
and then who actually showed?
Correct.
Do you have a sense, there's an awful lot of zeros and ones among staff. Do you have, I mean, climate I get for families. Do you have a sense of what happened with our staff that they're unwilling to do focus groups or not showing up, or what's going on there?
I do not. The only assumption that I can really make, and this is purely an assumption, is that during that week, I know there were some meetings being held in buildings around the DL programs, and so I don't know if staff members were more interested in attending what happened at respective buildings than coming to the focus groups. But outside of that, I cannot speculate. I have not received any direct information.
So does Dr. Jubiel have any concern? Because when I look at numbers like one, I mean, a focus group doesn't work very well if you only have one person, you know, just kind of a one-on-one interview. Does she have any concern about what to do with a data set? You know, this is what, about 20% of the people showed up that she sort of sought out to get. I'm just trying to get a sense of what happens now with the analysis when we're 20% of our staff and something like, I don't know, it was about 40 or 50, like the students showed up, it looked like. What's her take on what does she do with that? Is it normal, for one, for what she's used to? And if not?
Yeah.
what
I,
we
I,
should
I
do?
posed that specific question to her because I was concerned with the low turnout for staff in particular, and she said it's actually normal. So she did not express any kind of immediate concern. She said that honestly, our staff performed a little bit better than other districts she's worked with, which kind of surprised me. She was of course, very happy with our student participation, but she was not alarmed with the lack of participation by staff nor families.
Last question is about, I know you sent a long time ago now, so I don't know if you recall off the top of your head, but the quantitative data set, are we able, will we, now that we've kind of gone really deep dive into dual language programming and thinking about what we're going to do with DL, do we have data in the quantitative data set that's going to enable us in any way to shed any light on equity issues directly related to DL? Because I'm looking here, no teacher participation, so that's not going to tell us anything. The families, I saw one, so we don't have qualitative data, which is a big bummer, because they kind of at the beginning, I think that was what we were hoping for. Is there anything in the quant data that's going to help us?
I would have to go back and actually look at the data sets in which we were being asked for. I can't recall off the top of my head, but I would have to go back and examine that.
Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, this potentially is sort of backwards since we just sort of addressed low participation, but can you just remind me and maybe the public again, the folks that were asked were specifically asked by who? Like, how were these people targeted and selected?
For staff or?
Any group, just to kind of remind us as a collective.
So we sent out emails district-wide to all faculty, students, all families, as well as we used our information system to send out calls, flyers. We had information put in newsletters. I mean, I think we exhausted every possibility to make sure that we reached our families, students, and faculty. In a lot of schools, they reached out to specific students to ask them if they wanted to participate, since it was broken down by affinity. And to be honest with you, I think the reason why the participation, of course, was greater for students is because we could capture them right in the building. It was almost impossible to try to organize focus groups where we could go into the schools just because of scheduling, the lack of subs. So we had to host those focus groups after work. And then we're relying upon individuals to show up once they registered and took a slot that we could have potentially given to someone else.
Were there any, I guess, talk or thoughts about like snowball sampling and where you have a group that has agreed and done it and then they then go out and tell their friends in that group and get them involved? Was that
No.
part of the effort being made? Because I mean, I guess again, I'm still a little like, this is hard to take this as like participation, even if it's a norm. I guess I feel like we did talk extensively about, you know, qualitative information from these groups that would be a big part of what we would be looking at later. And I just don't see that right now.
So we were on a very tight timeline. We only had the auditor in town for a week. And so because of the different groups that the DELT team wanted to have participate in the focus groups, we had a very tight schedule. And again, one of the concessions that we did make is when we had low participation, I sent out personal emails to all of those individuals who registered and told them that they had the option of participating virtually. And set up those virtual focus groups, and individuals still did not participate.
And then my other question was about revisions. I know you had mentioned, will that be like specifically you and admin looking at it to make revisions and sending it back? How does that process
The DELT
work?
team,
The DELT team,
all the
okay.
individuals connected to the DELT team will have the opportunity to review.
All right. Thanks.
Anyone else with comments or questions? Go ahead, Ravi.
So for the family surveys, question about that. And so I filled out the family survey, and to me it seemed just like a implicit bias, worksheet, to figure out if you had implicit bias or not. Is that what it was?
I didn't design the tool.
I
So
mean,
it's
have
not,
you
it's
seen
not
the
my,
survey?
it's not my tool, excuse me?
Have you seen the survey?
I have seen the survey.
I mean, what's your opinion on it? I mean, you're a DEI trained guy, right?
I am.
So, I mean, in different trainings I've done in my own work, oftentimes when they do like an implicit bias assessment, those are the questions that are asked.
I think
you
the
know?
survey was designed to bring out, of course, if individuals hold biases against the district or if they feel like the district holds biases against students, obviously that was part of the design of the tool. But
Yeah, so just with that confirmation, I mean, when I look at the whole audit here, you have a survey that I think was purely an implicit bias assessment tool, which will say there is implicit bias, you know? And then you have these qualitative groups that had, although it is apparently the norm to have abysmal participation, but I can't believe you can really come to any kind of conclusion with that kind of participation. I don't know. And then the last piece is the quantitative analysis, which is aggregated data. So I'm not sure if it's going to say anything more than what's available on the Illinois report card. So given those three things, I'm not very optimistic we're going to get much useful information out of this audit. So that's just my comment about it.
Thanks, Robbie. Anyone else? Yeah. I mean, frankly, I'm really disappointed in the turnout. I understand weather and timing and all of that, but I think, as it's been echoed here by multiple people, I mean, we went this direction to collect, and largely because of the qualitative data that we'll be collecting, and I just don't know if we're going to be getting it.
Along those lines, for the last month or two, people have been pushing to postpone the single DL school thing for equity audit results, you know? And you have 0 out of 10 or 15 DL staff participation, and there was only like 6 total, or something like that, Latine or Spanish-speaking people in the survey out of 300 something that were submitted. So, you know, I don't know if we're going to get any information from this in regards to that line either.
I'm going to add, unfortunately, all the conversations that we were having at this level, and Lupe probably remembers, one of the sessions was immediately following a board meeting, I think, wasn't it, Lupe? Yeah. And yep. So that was one of the things, I just wanted to point that out, that was one of the reasons why we had a 0 there out of the 0 to 10, because those folks were more engaged in the conversations that were happening here at board level, and did not participate that week in the focus groups. That's not to say that they won't participate in the survey pieces, and as also a reminder, we're not talking about that tonight, but the dual language perspective will be heavily noted in the program evaluation that we're already, I mean, we've been sending out focus group information to those folks prior to break, and Lupe was sending things out even today. So we'll be able to at least get that, if not through the equity audit, definitely through the program evaluation piece.
I just want to thank Dr. Cathy for all this information. I think you've done a great job informing us, keeping us informed this whole process. I am not that surprised by this focus group participation, to be honest with you. Our admin team has told us for many, many months that many people do not participate in these surveys, no matter what the end result is. Some people might not even have internet. I mean, my own, where I live at, I was without it for over a month. There's a lot of factors that go into this. So unfortunately, these are the results we have. We have to figure out what our next plan is going to be from this. So thank you for all the information.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anyone else tonight? Really?
Add that I think if you have an opportunity to make a recommendation for Dr. Dubiel in the future, it seems that trying to front load just a couple days within a week to get all of these focus groups accomplished in a way that feels successful, you might need more time, right? Like recommend that if this is a norm that schools face this problem and we can't control the weather, but we can look at calendars that are made in advance and we can prepare, then I think you should be encouraging in the future that districts have opportunities outside of a 3-day window to complete this.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last chance.
But it was a 5-day window, not that it may have impacted, but it was 5 days, but.
What I'm saying, that's not, clearly not enough.
And so, you know, and I don't know, again, we would only be speculating if the results would have been any different, but again, we were also competing with other school districts who were on her calendar before us, and everything's a process. So when you're working with a consultant, sometimes you are limited by time. We picked the best time that was available for us in our district that would work, and these are the results that we have. And so, of course, if there were things that we would have been aware of beforehand to improve those results, we would have taken every possible measure to do so. But, you know, we have what we have at the moment, and we'll just have to work with that.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Caffey. Appreciate your time tonight.
You're welcome.
That completes our study topics. There is a call for a future special executive meeting tomorrow for student discipline. Superintendent's report.
Okay. What's that? Sorry. Thank you. No, I've only got a couple slides if you don't mind, George. Okay. All right, so it is January, and we always look forward to our community-wide celebrations that will be happening in the community to honor the life and dream of Dr. Martin Luther King. So January 15th at Cranert, we will be announcing the Living the Dream Scholar recipients. And so this year, we're really excited that we have several Urbana students on the recipient list. So Kristen Howell, Kiara Johnson, Jennifer Lopez, Gabrielle Mita, the other part of her name is Gabrielle Mita Imboyo. Haley Thompson is going to be the Pastor Claude Shelby President Award winner for Outstanding Achievement. So, yay. So let's give all 5 of our recipient winners a big hand. We're really excited. I know some years we have just 2 or 3, so to have 5 students representing Urbana is really exciting for us this year, so that's great. We included the Unity Breakfast information. I know many of us do tend to go to the Unity Breakfast, and just so it is out publicly, it will be at Vineyard Church, as it typically is, that Monday at 8:30. So congratulations again, our scholarship recipients. They were notified, I believe, today, and we'll be sharing this information out more widely on social media as well. So January is also National Mentor Month, and so as a mentor, this is always exciting for me. I know we have a lot of our staff in the district who mentor. So Thank a Mentor Day is January 11th this year. So that is a day where our mentors get a lot of little special surprises and special kudos throughout the day. They have their mentor benefit card that they take around, and our community really does wrap around the month of January to do everything that we can to thank our mentors. So the mentor lunch is planned for January 18th, and the board members are always invited to attend. So if you're interested in attending the mentor lunch, please let Lori know. And there's some training dates coming. Not only do we thank our mentors during the month of January, we also use it as an opportunity to recruit new mentors rather. So January 19th, we'll have a training at UMS, and then also on February 8th and February 15th. So thank you to all of our CU one-to-one mentors who currently mentor. I know my mentee is a senior this year, and we've been together since 3rd grade, so it's going to be really hard to watch her graduate, but it is definitely a rewarding experience. I would encourage anybody who has an hour a week I know I don't always get my hour a week in, and she has been extremely understanding all over the years, but we make sure we find time to get together as much as we can. So CU Connect, school and parents coming together. So the public library is offering some opportunities here, January 19th, 18th, and the 20th at Douglas Branch. And this is an initiative in collaboration with Unit 4 and our family engagement department, which Mrs. Webster leads with Ms. Mitchell, our family liaison. So we are promoting this to help our school and parents come together across both districts. So we'll share more information about that as well. Black History Month kickoff. So this month, anyone who's been in our district for any amount of time knows that this was Miss Mitchell's time of the year, and she really put a lot of effort into kicking off Black History Month in February. So in honor of Janice Mitchell, we are going to continue those efforts and still honor her life and legacy through a kickoff event. She worked at Dr. Williams for many years. When it was Prairie School, she was a Prairie parent. So the Black History program at Dr. Williams was always a love of hers. And so this year they are giving back a little of that love and honoring her during the Black History Month program on the 28th. And the Teach for Urbana, this effort has grown. I think we see the numbers growing every month. We've heard a lot of positive feedback from the community businesses who are wrapping around our staff as well as our teachers. So these are the businesses that we want to give a little shout out to for the month of January. And just again, we appreciate them and appreciate the efforts that their support is giving back to our students and staff and families. Upcoming dates. Again, Martin Luther King, the holiday weekend there. There'll be a lot of events in the community. We'll share those out. Staff Development Day prior to that Friday. Black History Month kickoff. And then our district has, for years and years, participated in National African American Parent Involvement Day in February. Of course, all parents are welcome. And that is during Black History Month as well. That is it for me. And no FOIAs.
Board reports. So
Hey, Paul, sorry,
sure.
I just wanted to interrupt. Before we start on the DL conversation, I wanted to give a special shout out to Kristen Howell because she interns and works with me at the Fab Lab and got her start at the Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center. So very connected to Janice Mitchell, and she is a recipient for the MLK Scholarship Award winner. So she started at Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center working at our Maker Lab there, is now hired as like a student employee at the Fab Lab and works for me and with me every summer teaching camp. So it's pretty cool that that's all coming together to honor Janice Mitchell and her. So
yes, and I should mention those other names too, now that you said that. So we also have Don Mosley Blackman will receive the James Burgess Susan Freeberg Humanitarian Award. Anthony Sullers will receive the Doris Hopkins Prestigious Community Service Award, and Reverend Terrence Thomas will receive the Dr. Martin Luther King Outstanding Achievement Award. So thanks for sharing that too. Yep.
All right.
Yeah, yay for everybody else, yes.
All right, so board reports. So I asked for basically space to be left on tonight's agenda for discussion. On December 7th, it seemed it was pretty evident that there wasn't sufficient support for a vote on December 13th to start a single building model at Leal in the fall of '23. But reading the room that night, it also seemed that there was a majority of board members still interested in exploring a single building for DL. So my hope tonight is to come up with a list of action items that we can follow up on for things that the district could achieve in order to get the district ready for a vote on a single building DL placement. So I would like to open the floor for individual board members to start discussing individual tasks that the district could achieve or information that the district could garner to prepare us for a vote. Would anyone like to start? Okay. Go ahead.
All right. I was giving the opportunity for someone else to talk, but so I think the first step, I have a multi-pronged recommendation here. The first step, just as a background, I will tell you in the world of surgical literature, there are plenty of outcomes for, wound infections, mortality, etc., that are outstanding in the published literature because they're done at specialized centers where they have systems in place for everything. So, but when you apply it to your own community practice, etc., your mortality rate may be much higher, and that is probably expected because you don't have all those systems in place or those supports. So, one thing we've noticed with this single dual language school model versus strand model is that there's just like a few reports out there, and so is what works at one school in Canada or one school in Texas going to apply to Urbana? So I think it's very important to have the first step be to determine locally if what we're doing is actually right or not. So this program or this evaluation that's coming out, because I think the equity audit is going to be a bust. So the dual language consulting group or whatever that's
The program assessment?
Program evaluation. Hopefully, the first step I think is to look at that because is the strand model working great for education? Because I think the primary goal is education. Or conversely, on these ESL students that are not in the dual language model, are they just doing that much better? And should we be looking at that as a actual goal? So I think the question that comes up considerably is whether, because the decision to go to a single dual language school, I think, is one made out of more passion than reason or logic. So I am trying to apply some logic and reason to the decision making here. So first, do we need a single dual language school or not is the first question before you do anything else.
Okay.
Then if the answer is yes, I think a couple of things that need to be done is, one, we should consult with the facilities committee on space at each elementary school to figure out, because I think there's nothing that should be left off the table here. The process that's been going on the last year was kind of honed in, laser focused on one outcome, and then because you don't want to displace the neighborhood school in the Dr. Williams area, it was focused on Lille. But we should be able to, from the facilities committee's perspective, from the size of the schools, how many strands you can have in each building, what is the population for each elementary school, to give us an idea of where might be the best building for that, or what is the availability at each building. Then, along those lines, the other thing that I don't think has ever been considered really is about the building of this potentially a new school. So one thing to be considered in that as well is, if you had a single DL K through 8 school, that would also offload a middle school as far as the number of people in it. So that could potentially combine two ideas, because there's a prior idea of a second middle school at some point. So, maybe that is the way to go. But you need those numbers from the facilities committee and thinking about those three different things. One is just doing it in a single school we already have, which school that might be, doing it in a new school, or 3, doing a K through 8 middle school. And then the third thing along those lines is, I think, at least my personal feeling is that this process should be part of a citywide redistricting plan and not independent of that. And if that is the case, I think we really need to hire, or look into hiring a consulting firm to make some recommendations based off of geography and socioeconomics on how to redistribute everything. So, you know, well, I did throw out the idea December 7th about, you know, Wiley being renovated and could then be renovated into a single DL school with the space. You know, that is an option to consider. But similarly, there are other buildings already renovated, potentially expanding Wheel with another 4 rooms might do the trick too, if that's where you're going back to. So, but how you distribute the town, you know, I would think this consulting firm's ask would be, give us like 3 or 4 different scenarios. You know, if, you know, say Thomas Paine is a single DL school, then what does the rest of the districts look like geographically to balance socio, you know, kind of like we did with the sub-districts, where you have the breakdown of, but not just race, you know, but also, you know, kind of a standard of living sort of thing, like average housing price or, you know, free and reduced lunch eligibility, or what is, you know, have that proportion.
Educational attainment of parents.
Yes, exactly. Have those things be, so it's multiple data points, not just what John Gutenberg could probably produce. So that's why I say consulting firm. To look at those and give us 3 or 4 different scenarios, and then that could all be hashed out in, you know, public debate or whatever, consideration, or for people to look at and then decide. But that is, that's what I got.
Well, thank you, Ravi. Other people want to weigh in?
Sure. Similarly, I kind of kept going back to the data presented about classroom sizes, particularly for Dr. Williams and Leal, and then growth, and then remembering and thinking about your slide, Paul, about how, like, population-wise, we're not really necessarily growing, but yet we continue to have 2 schools that are crowded, that we continue to ask families in DPW to relocate. So to me, I kind of keep going back to that, because I'm like, that is a redistricting problem if we're not seeing growth, but we still have schools that are overcrowded and other ones that are not. So I guess I echo and second that we sort of have to infuse some of this, like, we're relocating and moving students, why and how, like, that is part of a redistricting plan. And I do think that, I guess I know where I have some sense of where we started and sort of like navigating need throughout this conversation. And I know this isn't really a really great looking part of that puzzle because it's complicated, but I guess I kind of can't seem to divorce the two. Like, I'm having a really hard time figuring out how to meet the needs, because that's really what we're being told to do by the teachers, is there are very serious needs that are needing to be addressed, but we still don't have a plan. And to me, this provides an avenue for a plan. Like, we hear, I mean, and that's where I'm kind of like stuck, is that, like, at the end of the day, that is still a need to say, like, the best learning can happen in this environment. That is not a plan. And that's, I guess, where, I mean, I guess a redistricting option provides a good avenue forward, even if it's painful. Because this last year and a half has been equally painful, but there has been no plan.
Yeah.
So I yet to see, like, I think that it is imperative that the newly formed BPAC committee be front and center at any sort of, like, surveys, engaging families, whatever it takes, because clearly this is, you know, a thing that's difficult to do, but I think that in that effort of the realistic formation of that committee and how it operates needs to be front and center, and what the ways in which we're asking and engaging stakeholders. I feel like there were some talks of external program evaluation. I don't really know how that coincides with like a consulting firm redistricting. I think they're separate, but whatever those outcomes are of the current evaluation that's happening currently, that seems to be like, that would be another piece of the puzzle that would be part of a plan moving forward. Again, it's like we're looking at learning outcomes and the ideas that we're improving those and making sure we can say we're improving them, and this is why we're improving them, and this is how we will be doing it. Maybe that's it, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, this continues to be something that I find very emotional, and so I'm trying to figure out, like, I try to go back to thinking about, like, if I really wanted to build a house, what would I need a new house. I don't, but let's say I need a new house. And how would I get there? Like, I'm an emotional, aesthetic person, and so I could tell you everything that I think would look good and what I really want, but like, realistically, I would need to like find land, like get a surveyor, find an architect, get, blueprints, find a builder. Then it's like, so that's where I guess I really would love to see us be able to say, like, these are the actualized steps to get to to address the need. So that's what I got right now.
All right, appreciate it. Well, Anne she's out ill tonight, but she did email in her statement here. So I'll go ahead and read this. Number one was demonstrated strong support from the Latinx community. If we revisit the idea of a whole school model and we need to administer a new survey to try to capture as many responses as possible, it would be good if the new BPAC could help with constructing and distributing a new survey to families independent of administration and teachers. Two, consideration of various strand models at any and all possible buildings. Several community members and staff had said that to house the program at Leo will require a much smaller program with larger class sizes and less diversity. The district has 2 schools which are much bigger than Leo, DPW, and Yankee Ridge. While they are 4-strand schools, they are already needed to house other student groups in the district. But I bring up the point because they are both equipped to function adequately for those populations without worrying about outgrowing their needs in a few years' time. We need to examine all of our schools and talk about our building administration and talk to all our building administrators for impact assessment first and foremost before we decide to put the school anywhere that can accommodate more than 2 classes per grade. 3 is external program assessment before making such a major change. We need to understand why these students are not doing well, and that means a transparent review of learning outcomes. I don't suggest going back to square one, as has previously been suggested, and reevaluating DL programming across many different research institutions like we did over 10 years ago. However, we could go back to our original data sources that helped us form our DL program and seek updated research on what sorts of issues are trending with DL education in other areas so that we can compare our district needs to what new developments have occurred since we started. 4 is clearly defined list of problems that are unique to DL, i.e. not challenges faced by all teachers in the district, and justification on how the whole school is the best way to address those challenges. And 5, a transition plan must consider negative impacts on monolingual students and seek the input of parents and teachers. Many monolingual families in this district are just as vulnerable as EL families, and we need to acknowledge the negative impacts on all families. So a lot of these are common themes I think have been expressed by others as well. When I was been struggling with this, as you all have for so long, I think we have kind of a Gordian knot with regards to the 3 things. I mean, one of the reasons I was really hesitant to pull the trigger for December 13th myself is I think that we need to make a decision on what to do with Wiley. I would have hated to have chosen, placement at Lille and then moving monolingual students to Wiley, and then maybe 2 years later having to shut Wiley down because it's being refurbished. So I think that before we can make a decision on placement, we need to make a decision on what to do with Wiley, which kind of feeds into the facilities committee. But regardless of what we decide to do with facilities, and regardless of what we decide to do with single building versus strand model, I think we have to redistrict. We're busing 100 kids a day from the DPW neighborhood into Yankee Ridge because DPW is full. And if frankly, if that were my neighborhood, or if this were the Lille neighborhood that we were doing that to, we would have people here every meeting yelling at us about it. It's absolutely imperative that we do this, but if we're looking at like a decision tree, yeah, I think we have to make the other decisions first before we redistrict. So, I mean. What we do with Wiley. Exactly. Yep. I mean, that's kind of the three things that are all feeding into this. So we have to make a decision on, So I mean, I think it sounds like we want to wait for the program evaluation. That was one thing, that we can do that in parallel. Another thing is, I think we want to have more comprehensive survey data from the Latinx community on whether or not this single building model is their preference. I hate for us to be making decisions on their behalf without their input, full input. And then, of course, that would be leveraging the BPAC to try to get a broader assessment from the Latinx community. I think we need to start talking about what to do with Wiley. That could be done in parallel. And boy, this is going to take a long time. Frankly, I like the idea of looking at a consulting company to help us try to fairly redistrict when we can finally get to that point. At least investigating that path, because when we tried to do this ourselves eons ago, a lot of work went into it and nothing happened.
I mean, I guess I would continue to advocate, though, for not saying, like, I don't want to continue to leave our DL teachers thinking that this is like an insurmountable hill. I think we can actually continue to lay out and say, okay, these are the consulting firms, this is what this happens, we want this to, I mean, I think we have to be savvier and more effective in like the questions we're asking and who we're getting to help us. Because we can't continue to say like, we want this to be important, we think it's important, but we're never gonna really actually do anything about it.
Yeah.
That's trash.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So, continue to say like, these are the consulting firms we are voting on, this is when this is gonna happen. Like we can set realistic timeframes based on, I mean, there is a wealth of knowledge in this room of experiences that have been had on what how we can negotiate forward. So I think we still have to be like steadfast and direct about the stages that it will take and when decisions will be made. And I think if we can get a clear plan, we have a better way to like figure out what we're voting on. Like I think voting on, okay, these are the firms that are doing this thing, that's easier than saying like, we hypothetically want this to happen in a way that we're not really sure about. Like we have to be more concrete and direct and like, and I just think that I think we can also lean on our BPAC, and I think we can lean on lots of members of this community. I've heard it several times from people that they want to be directly involved in helping. So if we need to help get survey data, we can ask these people. That's what they've asked us. I mean, let's do it. Take advantage of it. And maybe that's not the norm or what's been happening before, but I'll sit with an iPad out in front of a school and ask people to fill out a survey. Gladly. I have had to ask people surveys all the time. It's painful, but like if we need to do it, we need to do it because we actually need the information to make a good decision. Give me an iPad. I'm ready.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I agree to some extent with you, Laura, about how we do need to come up with a timeline. The problem is, it's almost like with the equity survey. We waited so long, and I think if we would have made a decision, then maybe we would have had better information. It's hard to say, you know, but the timelines are very, very important when we do a study like this. I've heard what you've said, I've heard what Paul and Ravi have said. I'm in total agreement about the redistricting. The thing that I wonder about is Wiley has always been last on the list. These families want their school to be like the other schools we've redone. I think that's important because we've always put them last. The new school, we looked into that a while back, and I don't think we really had enough students to really make that fly at that time. Things might be different now, but we did a lot of research on that, or I should say John Dimmitt did, and he had looked into that a lot. K through 8 school, I think that would be great, but I also think that down the line we could have some issues with that as far as developing a K through 8 dual language. Is that what you were talking about, Ravi? Okay. Yeah, because my concern is we currently have a teacher shortage, and we're using all the resources we can to make it through every day, it sounds like. So with an added school, I think things might be stretched a lot thinner. Right now, I feel like the dual language teachers are stretched very thin, trying to pool resources, teachers, everything else. So I think they need some answers, and we had sent them out to do a lot of research, and they brought back information for us, but yet the board, now I was gone in December, but the board kept saying, more information, but yet they brought that back to us, and we're still asking for more. So maybe we weren't clear enough to them if we did need more from the beginning of this, you know. So those are just a few of my thoughts.
I appreciate that. Tori, do you have anything to add tonight? Sure, of course.
So, one thing two things I want to say. One is about Wiley. The people of Wiley, I assume, to some degree, I don't speak to all the people of Wiley, just a few, they are worried that Wiley's either going to be closed or, Wiley will be taken away and used in some other manner, whether that's like a new central office building or, the DL school now or whatever it might be.
Right.
So, I don't know if this is something we can state right now, or we have to wait for this facilities committee discussion. But at least my personal feeling is we need to renovate Wiley to be a school. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. Hopefully some others will chime in on that comment. And the other thing is, what was the other thing? Something Brenda just said.
I was talking about K through 8 school, the new school.
And we have a lot of K through 8. We spent 4 or 5 months talking about a K-8 as one of the original charges of the committee, and it was the middle school, the people who were there representing UMS and the elementary group decided that was not a viable option. I can pull that information and share that again just as it was in our original presentation, but we can refresh everyone about our discussions about K-8. We had several months of discussing that, so.
Very good. But
We
the
can
other thing
reshare that.
I remembered I was going to say, I just remembered, was the thing that I've been asking for a long, long time, I've never seen, is how are English language learners actually doing as a group themselves? What is that academic performance? Not when they're combined with the native English speakers in the same grade, or
Oh,
the same
gotcha.
class, but how are English language learners doing themselves? So we've had 10 years of this program, and we don't really have ever seen that information ever during this time period. You know, so
I'm hoping that that information specifically will come out of the program
Yes.
evaluation.
and then I think the board needs to demand that we get that information annually from the dual language program. You know, on how it's going each year, and not think about it again for 10 years and then be like, hey, I won't be here in 10 years to ask the question. But how's the program doing? We haven't heard anything about it for 10 years. You know, it's something that for any educational program, you should be doing that every single year, you know, to say whether you're actually educating people or not. And we don't know if we ever have been. You know, all we have are graduation numbers, you know, and even then that's not even disaggregated. It's all combined, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah, so I don't have much to add. That my talking point, many of them I made in the meeting a couple of weeks ago. They've all been put back on the table. But for me, I think we need to just do some of these things. It does feel like a lot, but a conversation about Wiley can be had. We may not know, but we need to start having it. So it needs to be on the next, we need to have a facilities committee meeting. We need to talk about it. Will we have all the answers in that moment? I don't know. But then, you know, we need to talk about what does it take for us to redistrict? What is a reasonable timetable? As Laura said, who are the people who can help us with this? And just start chipping away at the bit, like, what does it really take? Because we throw around, oh, but it could be 5 years of this or 2 years of this. That gets scary for people in the community, gets scary for me. We have, you know, a new board, but we now know 6 of the board members because they're uncontested elections. So 3 people in this room will be continuing. We know the other 3, and then there's 1 district we don't know yet. Those 3 people, I would love to see brought into the conversation now because they're coming into the fire when it's hot, and we have a community that is motivated, and we need to have them put their money where their mouth is. They've been talking a lot and saying, I'm not throwing shade here. What I'm saying is they said, we're willing to help. We're motivated. We have, you know, we will participate. Let's leverage those things where we can. They don't need to be making all the decisions, but if we need people power, we have people power. We have the ball rolling. We don't want to stop it by saying, this hill is too big to climb. We don't know what the first step is. You know, we have a bunch of steps that I think we can take all at the same time. And even those of us, you know, who are rolling off, I will put my money where my mouth is and say, I am willing to participate in whatever way I personally can be helpful. And so let's chip away at the big picture and just start having the conversations where we can. OMA rules make it so complicated to do this in this kind of setting because it's high stakes, because we say something that some person picks up on. When we talk about closing Wiley, they're going to hear that and say, wait a minute, somebody said we're closing Wiley. Well, we didn't say that, but any piece of this meeting can be picked off, and we don't want that. We want to be able to talk about these things in a setting where that is the focus. What are we doing with Wiley? Then we can talk about, here are some options. What is, you know, I've sort of said everything I want to say, but I think we just got to do it.
I appreciate it. We did have a facilities, like a broad facilities committee put together about 7 or 8 years ago, where we basically did a ranking order of the big facilities needs before the district, and the top placed one was basically finishing the elementary schools. But even at that time, though, there was a proviso done by that committee that basically said we'd need to evaluate Wiley because of its central location in the district for a possible inclusion of a special program, whether it's being designated as a STEAM school or designated as an international baccalaureate program or some such thing. And so there was, even at that time, this nascent idea that there could be another committee made down the road to kind of figure out what kind of special program to be done at Wiley to leverage the fact that it's the most centrally located school in the district. just putting that out there. So in terms of what kind of a charge we would give a facilities committee, I think that those are the kind of two things. We need to look at our ability to bond and how quickly, and then accompany that with basically making a decision on the type of programming and the type of school Wiley is going to be, because I don't think that just putting this out there, I don't think that it's jointly. If it's a neighborhood, if we keep Wiley strictly as a neighborhood school, I'm not sure that we'd either have to. Sorry, I'm really stumbling over my words here. It would limit, I guess, the decisions we could make with regards to placement of a single building deal program, if that's what we still wanted to do. So we have to take away all these factors into account. I don't think we have the money to, for example, refurbish Wiley to match the other buildings, and build a separate school, for example, as was proposed. For one thing, I think we'd have too many classrooms in the district for a population that's been basically flat for 12 years. But beyond that, I guess the other item to look at is there's been this nice repeated sentiment in public comment and in discussions here, is that we're going to continue to see increased participation in the DL program. If you look at the data over the past 12 years, there's been a sharp increase since 12 years ago, but that's basically falling in line with the program's matriculation first through one building and then through the second building. The past 3 to 4 years, it's been fairly flat. So I don't know if we need to plan for a 500 student building in order to house a single building DL module. So that's one of the things that we'd have to look at as well, is predictions on growth of the program. So that'd be another charge. So I guess in terms of our direction for administration, it would be to start, I guess, coming up with plans to bring a facilities working group together, begin answering some of these questions. I think that's the first piece we can do in parallel to the others. So we can have an update down the road on that. Anybody else have any further comments or instructions? Right. I guess now would be the time for any other board reports people might have.
So I just wanted to let board members and the public know that my daughter has decided to do a blood drive on MLK Day. That is going to be at Martin Luther King Elementary School in the cafeteria from 11 to 2:30. And when she thought about doing this, it was mainly with the thought of NICU babies and sickle cell patients. But obviously the blood goes to the most needed person at the time. She's doing this in collaboration with Impact Life, which typically does 1 to 2 events at the high school each year as well. Individuals need to be 16 years of age or older. 16-year-olds do need to have consent from their parents through a form. And the organization is giving away either a free t-shirt or an electronic $25 gift card for first or second time donors. So there's 25 slots, and we will get that posted publicly for those who have an interest in donating. 11 a.m. to 2:30, although that could extend another hour and a half if we get more than 25 people that sign up. So we're shooting for at least 25. That's what the need is, like the minimum need. So we will expand a little bit if it goes any further. But that's her next thing coming off the HBCU fair. She stays busy.
Any further board reports? If not, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.